Well, yes, like Helena said, my name is Misty Clark, and I actually write a blog, Moms for Lowered Expectations. But what I really like to do is I like to be in front of people doing comedy. And so, but I'm just getting started, so we'll see how good it is. But I do appreciate you letting me practice on you this morning. And so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I'm gonna tell you some funny stories, and then we'll do some Bible stories, and then we'll have an application to do towards the end, and sing a song together because everybody likes singing, right? But I'm actually from Indiana. I moved out here to the west, in Pullman. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Well, I just messed it up. Okay, now, whatever. It's all good. So I moved out to Pullman about 14 years ago. And that's where we went to church up there, and that's where I met my husband. He already had a house down here and lived and worked down here in Lewiston. And so when I got married, I got a husband and a house. So it worked out for me. But he, so when we moved down here, though, like I said, I'm originally from southern Indiana, about 30 minutes from Kentucky. And I grew up in a really conservative church. And so, like a good little church girl, I didn't struggle with saying cuss words when I was little. And so one time I can count on one hand the amount of times that I cussed growing up, but the most memorable time was on the way home from church. So, we were at church and another girl had said a word, and I didn't know if it was a cuss word or not, if it was, bad or good or whatever. So we were driving home, and my mom is driving, and I'm sitting in the seat right behind her. And I said, Mom, so and so said a word, and I'm not sure if it's, an okay word or if it's a bad word. And she said, well, just what was it? And I said, well, I don't want to say it. I mean, if it's a cuss word, I don't want to say it. And so she, says, well, how am I going to know if it's a cuss word if you don't tell me? So she creates this really safe environment of there's grace here. Just say the word. It's all good. So I say mother effer. And she's like, oh, yeah, Misty, you're not supposed to say that word. That's a really, really bad one. That's like the worst one. Like, if that's not the worst one, it's like almost the worst one. And so, yeah, we don't ever say that. And so I hollered back at her and was like, you're the one that told me to say it. And she goes, I know, I'm sorry. But yeah, that's a bad one. Do not say that one. Don't say that one. I'm like, okay. So, but I asked her recently about that story, if she remembered it, and she said, yeah, I do remember it, and I just never thought it would be that bad of a word. I think she thought I was going to say tushy or something. So but in the way she remembers it, she wasn't hollering at me. We were having intense fellowship. So, and I was the firstborn, so she was a little harder on me than she was the other kids, because that's just how we are with firstborn. We get shocked a little more. So, yeah, so you can use that with your kids. That you're having intense fellowship. You're not hollering at them. So, yeah. But another, fast forward to when I was the mom of a few little kids, and I started having a real struggle with cussing, where I could not stop. I just couldn't make it stop, and my favorite word was the F word. I don't know why, but my tongue just landed on the F word. And so, but I would always say it under my breath. I would always, it'd be under my breath, or I'd go in the bathroom, or it'd be in my head, like take the quarter over and over and over and over. And, but I felt horrible because I would be like, you like get up early and you have your time with Jesus. And I'm like, oh, that was great and awesome. And like within 5 minutes, I'm like raging and flying the F word in my head, and I'm like, are you joking? Like, where did that go? Like, I am, anyhow. And so it just was such a struggle at that time. But, so I kept praying. My mother-in-law had said that she had prayed grace over her boys, my husband and his brother, whenever they were little, that they wouldn't remember some of the things that we hope our kids don't remember and that we do. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to go with that. So I just kept praying grace. Lord, I pray they don't catch on to that word. I pray they don't catch on to that spirit, blah, 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 So one morning we're coming to this Bible study, okay? And I'm in the bedroom getting ready, and I hear my 3-year-old in the living room hollering at the TV. And I didn't know what he was hollering at, but I looked in there, and he's got his fist doubled up, and he's jumping up at the TV, and he's hollering, F it up, F it up, F it up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so not cool. Like, we're going to Bible study. Are you kidding me? Like, but I knew that we needed to talk about that we don't say those words. We try not to say those words. And so I thought, okay, we're running late, but I do need to address this. So I go in there and ask him, so what did you say? Huh? I said, F it up. And I'm like, okay, well, let's try to not say that. And he said, well, Daddy says it. And I'm like, yes, I can blame this on my dad. But I knew Dad didn't say it. I knew Dad didn't. That's not his struggle. And it wasn't during that time. And so I said, well, let's try to not say that word till Daddy comes home, and then we can talk to Daddy about it and figure out, what's going on. And so, but, as a mom, and, I don't know, some of you are going through a different struggle, but I just thought, oh my goodness, like my kid is going to go to Bible study. I'm going to get confronted on him teaching other toddlers cuss words in the nursery. And so I just, started praying like, God, please help me to not, when I possibly get confronted, by this situation, that I don't lash out and I just humbly say, yep, I'm struggling with that right now. And yeah, we're talking about it. We're working through it, and just help me to have the right attitude about it. And so, I don't think he taught anybody the word. I didn't hear anything about it, but afterwards. But, his dad got home and turned out, it was our oldest, and it was our oldest. And so he had, he had been, throwing some tantrums like they do when they're 3. And my husband had been telling him, suck it up. And so, but he had interpreted it as the other word. So when Matt comes home and, and the oldest is doing something and my husband's like, suck it up. And he goes, see, Daddy says it. And I'm like, oh, praise the Lord. It was suck, not the other word. So this is good. But we did have a little phonics lesson on, which word you say and which word you don't and the different sounds that they sound like. So, but sometimes adults also need phonics lessons. And sometimes cultural areas of the United States can get you in trouble, because one time when I was dating my husband, his office was having a going away party for their boss at a bar. So there you go. And we were in the bar, and there was a big, long, it was along the wall, there was booth seating and then a big, long table, and there were 2 tables kind of offshooting the big one. And Matt and I were in the middle. And so we sat down, and the guy across from me starts to introduce himself. And he did it in a way to where I could tell he was lying, like that wasn't his real name, And so I thought, well, I'll get you back. So he puts out his hand and he says, hi, my name is Bob. I'm like, yeah, it's not Bob. So I said, my name is Pudding Tang. Ask me again, I'll tell you the same. And that's a silly joke that we say in Indiana. I don't know, said it all growing up. And so he looks over at his coworker and says, what? And I thought, oh, well, you must not have heard me, because it was dark and it was loud, because it was a bar. There was some karaoke going on. And so he looks at me and he says, what? And I said, Pudding Tang. Ask me again, I'll tell you the same. I thought, you must not have heard this one before. This is funny. So he looks at his coworker again, like, what in the world is she saying? Like, okay, I don't get it, but whatever. But then he starts laughing, this kind of nervous laugh, and I start laughing like, ha, yeah, okay, like I'm getting the thumbs up from the coworkers. This is good. And yeah, so we go back to Matt's house. He like I was saying, he lived down here. I lived up in Pullman in an apartment. I'd left my car there. So we went back to Matt's house, and he said, so what did you say to Bob when you were introducing yourself? And so I'm feeling all proud that I told a funny joke, and I'm like, Pudding Tang. Ask me again, I'll tell you the same. Like, pudding and tang, okay? That's important. And so he goes, yeah, there's a word we use over here in the West, and it means a female private part. So you've just introduced yourself as a female private part to my coworkers. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That is a joke we've said all growing up. Like, pudding tang, it's a joke. Like, it's funny, And he goes, no, it's not. And I said, well, you need to go find him tomorrow and correct it. You should ask your husbands. They might know what the word is. I don't know. But I'm not going to say it on tape, so I'm not going to say it. I said, well, you've got to go find him tomorrow, and you've got to correct this. I thought the guy's a jokester, won't be a big deal. And my husband goes, I'm not going to go find him on plan and say, hey, let me fix my wife's little female part, private female part joke and tell you she didn't know what she was talking about. I'm like, okay. So a few years later, we were in church, and I looked down the pew, and there's Bob. So, like, okay, hi. His name was Bob. And so, I knew that. His name was Bob, but I won't say his name either. And so I figured either he figured out that I didn't know what I was talking about, or that I'd had a meeting with Jesus, and that's why we were in the same pew at church. And so, whatever. Either way, it worked out fine. But apparently, you can say these words separate, but you should not say them together. So just believe me, you shouldn't do that. I don't know if you should Google it either, because I don't know what will come up. So don't do that either. But speaking of food, when growing up, I didn't care a whole lot to learn how to cook. I just didn't think it was worth the time. My sister liked to cook, and my mom could cook, and I was like, whatever, I don't care. And I remember my mom taking me to the stove, and she was trying to teach me how to make macaroni and cheese. And I just remember thinking, why do I need to learn how to make macaroni and cheese? Like, Mandy, my sister, she makes awesome macaroni and cheese. And if I want macaroni and cheese, I'll either just like put it in the microwave, or I'll just get one of you guys to make it for me. I'm not gonna stand here and learn how to do this. And so I didn't know a whole lot about cooking when I got married. And even, my husband is a really good cook. His mom's a really good cook, and he took cooking classes in college and knew a lot about food. And so when we were dating, I had invited him to someone's house for a barbecue, and I told him to bring a snack. Well, he showed up with sugar snap peas, and I had never seen a sugar snap pea. I didn't know what a sugar snap pea was. I didn't know how to eat it. And he, like you can pull the end off and do the little string thing. And I'm like, where is the chips and dip? Like, why did you bring a vegetable as a snack to a barbecue? And so it was like the closest I had ever brought to a snack were, okay, well, here's the peas. Yeah. But I brought Cheetos because they look like a carrot, and they go well with ranch, right? So I didn't try that part, but I'm sure they go well with ranch. Everything goes well with ranch, but so he knew a lot about food, and so I did eventually learn the difference between a snack and a treat, and I've been known to bring vegetables to a gathering, so I'm growing up a little bit, but when we started having children, I wanted to learn more about food, and so I started reading blogs about food and magazines and cookbooks and watching videos, and I will say that in all my research, the phone book is the best thing. The takeout part of the phone book is the best cookbook ever. And sometimes my cooking is takeout because, when it's like burning and you've got the flames coming off of it, and then you take it outside to hose it off, and so that's actually like when you do a fire drill because you're doing the sweet potato casserole again, and the last time you had a fire extinguisher for the stove, and yeah, the kids are, now what are we supposed to do if this sets fire? But when I was learning how to cook, I one day I was making salmon, and this is how much I didn't know, or didn't care to know, I guess, really. I didn't understand the whole salmonella thing, and so it was later in the day, and so I called my husband, and I said, okay, I'm making salmon, but I don't understand. I thought salmon was like for eggs. So if it's salmon, is it still called salmonella? Because I also hadn't worked with raw fish. We ate a lot of canned fish growing up. We had tuna and whatnot, so I didn't really, I didn't, work with like fillets of fish. And I'm like, is it called, salmonella still? And he goes, well, that is a very good question. And he said, well, when it is salmon, it's called salmonella. But when it's eggs, it's called egganella. And I'm totally believing him. Totally going with it because I don't know. And so I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Okay, egganella. Okay. And he would always like try to say silly things to get me to say stuff in public. Like he's not mean, just being goofy. And so just, like whatever. And so I'm like, oh, egganella. Okay, well, this is good to know. And he goes, and chicken is chickenella. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is good. And I'm totally like buying it, totally buying it. And then for whatever reason, when he got to beef vanilla, I just didn't believe it. I just was like, okay, that is not that. That cannot be right. Beef vanilla does not even sound right. And so I was like, you're tricking me. That's no, you're trying to get me to say this out in public. so, but the funny thing is, we did start saying it at home. So we still call it egganilla, chickenilla, and beefanilla, and whatever. And so I've been over at somebody's house before cooking, and I dropped chicken juice on their counter, and I go, oh, sorry, I just got chickenilla juice on your counter. And they looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, yeah, nobody else says chickenilla. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. That wasn't, yeah. Okay, that's a family joke, so, yeah. But so I do get these funny looks for that. But a few years ago, I started telling my kids a very corny joke. It's really corny, I'll warn you. That they would do something silly, and I would tell them, you crack me up like a Ritz, ha ha ha, like a cracker, And so, yeah, sorry. But we didn't buy Ritz anymore, like these are like adult crackers. And so we were on to Goldfish and the animal crackers by that point. So they're kind of like, what's Ritz? I don't get what a Ritz is, And so I'm like, oh, well, it's a cracker. So then I just started saying, you crack me up like a cracker. Well, they started calling each other cracker. And so they would be like, hey, cracker, what's up? Hey, cracker, give me my toy back. Hey, cracker. Now, if you don't know, cracker is a derogatory term for a white person. So it really started to turn inappropriate pretty fast. And so like, we probably should teach you to not call each other that because that's probably not going to work out so well in public. So we start telling them, okay, let's try to not call each other cracker. Like, mommy was making a joke like a cracker, but it's not a funny thing to call each other. And, of course, all this, is it a bad word? Well, yeah, just don't say it, And so, yeah, the whole cuss word. I'm like, oh. So we go to McDonald's one day. And we're at McDonald's, and I had Allison, who is our third born. She was a baby, and the boys had gone up into the play set, and they were like 2 and 4, somewhere in there, 2 and 4, 3 and 5, something like that. And all of a sudden, I hear first I see this boy who I didn't recognize go flying across the dining area, and I'm like, what is going on? Well, then I see my oldest go flying after him, and I'm like, oh, okay, come back, what's going on, what's happening? And I heard Bruce, our second child, crying, and so I thought, okay, Wayne, our oldest, goes, that boy called Bruce an idiot, and he was taking up for his little brother, and I'm like, okay, I let's figure this out. And so Bruce comes down and he's doing the ugly cry, he called me an idiot. I don't know why he called me an idiot. I didn't do anything to him, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, okay, so did you ask him to not call you names anymore? And he's like, no, I forgot to try that. And so I'm like, okay, well, just ask him not to call you names. And but you're not an idiot, right? You know that just because somebody calls you something doesn't mean that's what you are. And he's like, yeah, Mom, okay, And so he starts to go back up the stairs, and Wayne starts to go back up there. That little boy was still over there with his grandma. We found out later that was actually his grandma that was with him. And Bruce comes back down the ladder, and he goes, Mom, I'm going to try to not call him a cracker, okay? Good job, Bruce. That would be good. Not try the cracker thing. And so they go back and they're playing, and everything's fine, and then they come back down and we're eating our food, and and they were at the age where they understood that if somebody did something to them, you would lash back at the person, but they didn't understand why somebody would just say something, to you or whatever, rude. And so they're like, well, why did he call Bruce an idiot? Like, Bruce didn't do anything to him, And so I'm kind of going over with them, like, sometimes we had a bad day and we lash out at people, or sometimes, we're just having a sad time in life, and we lash out. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what kind of day he had. So, so just ask him to, not call you names anymore. And so that, they were okay. And so we get done with this conversation, and we're eating, and I see out of the corner of my eye the grandma's coming over. And she comes over to the table. The little boy had left. He went to I don't know where he went, actually, but probably went to the car or the body. But but the grandma comes over, and she apologizes. I'm really sorry about my grandson. What he called him a name, and I said, that's okay. It happens like every 2 minutes at our house, so don't feel bad. It's all good. Like, it happens all the time. And so she explained that his dad had passed away a few years prior, and he lives about 6 hours from here, and he was up visiting for like 10 days or so, and he was just having a real hard time with it, and he was a lot more than she could handle, and so I was having a really hard time. And so I, talked with her and told her, I'll be praying for you, and and the boy, and and we hugged, and she walked off, and then I got to talk to the boys about what had happened, and you're trying to have that conversation. Like, you don't want them getting freaked out that their dad's going to pass away, but they also, it's like, well, this is life. So, introduce you to this, that, the little boy's sad, his dad's not here anymore, and this and that. And so, we got to have that lesson, and then we prayed for them. And, as I thought about that little boy and just how his life was so changed by that thing in his life, sorry, that event in his life that happened, that God has a plan for that little boy, and that God has plans for all of us, and that sometimes we're going to have really, really hard stuff happen, like, people passing away, and sometimes we may not have, stuff happen all our life. Things are just kind of, not a whole lot. And sometimes there's harder times than there are others. And so it made me think about that verse in Jeremiah, the one, Jeremiah 29:11. And the verse reads, I will get it here. This way, 29 is after 13, in case you guys are wondering, just so you know for later. So, but I can't drop myself, so that'll be good. So the verse says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." And, I've used that verse a lot when stuff is going bad, like, okay, there's hope, like, everything's going to be okay, he's going to get me out of this. And, or during a time when I wasn't sure what the outcome was going to be of a situation. And I thought, a lot of times we do use things out of context. I've done that before. You post all these things on your wall, and then it's like, oh, that isn't what it means at all, And so I started looking it up in the Bible to see, well, where is this at in the history of Israel? Like, what does this really mean in context? And it happened during a really hard time in the Israelites' history. And just a little background, the Israelites, their country, they'd had 3 kings, Saul, David, and Solomon. And then they split into 2 kingdoms, the northern kingdom, Israel, and the southern kingdom, Judah. And one way to remember which one is which is do your alphabet. So if you sing the ABC song and then you go HIJKLMNOP, there you go. Then you can remember. Just don't go this way, then you'll have it backwards. But your ABCs, and you start at the top, you can remember which one's which. So anyhow, that was for free. So so they had 3 kings, and then they split, and then they had a bunch of kings after that, and most of them were evil in the eyes of the Lord, but they had a few that were good kings. And so they had started worshiping the gods of their neighboring countries. And Israel, the northern kingdom, had already been taken into captivity by the Assyrians. And so Jeremiah, the prophet who this book's named after, he was warning the southern kingdom, Judah, you have got to stop worshiping those other idols. You've got to turn back to the one true God. You see what happened to Israel, and it's going to happen to you if you don't stop. And they didn't listen. They didn't change their ways. And so he allowed them to be overtaken by Babylon, the Babylonians, which is, different than the Assyrians, different country. And so they were overtaken by the Babylonians. And so here they are in under foreign rule that they didn't want. I mean, they hadn't been following the Lord anyway, but they probably picked the bad guy that they had. You know, I mean, they still liked him because they were living in those ways. But here they're under foreign rule, and their disobedience is right in their face. You know, the consequence of their actions is right there. It's like you're not going to escape it, and God's not getting them out of it either. He tells them to get comfy, and because He's not going to rescue them from this consequence. So I'm going to read this section here, Jeremiah 29:4 through 14. It says, "This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there, do not decrease. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. Yes, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you. Do not listen to the dreams you encourage them to have. They are prophesying lies to you in my name. I have not sent them, declares the Lord. This is what the Lord says. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my gracious promise to bring you back to this place. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back from captivity. I will gather you from all the nations and places where I've banished you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back to the place from which I carried you into exile." So, during that passage, there's not just a, hey, you're going through a hard time, I'm going to get you out of it. You know, God says, you know what? You didn't listen, and you're going to be here for a while. And so get cozy, make a family, you know, find wives for your kids, and stop listening to the prophets that I didn't send. Listen to the ones I am sending and speaking through. And in 70 years, I will come back and get you. I know. Some of them are going to be dead. They're not going to see it, you know. They're not going to see that promise fulfilled. But they can look back and see that, okay, in our history, we've done this before, and, you know, and they were, you know, enslaved in Egypt, and God brought them out, and so He's going to make good on that promise. God is going to make good on that promise. I know He's going to do it, and He's going to come through. And as I was thinking about those promises, I also was thinking about a story in 1 Kings about David and Solomon, and how, you know, God made promises to David. God made promises to David, and David and God were really tight. And David wanted to honor God by building a temple. And God said, well, actually, it's not going to be you, because you're a man of war. You have war on your hands, so blood on your hands. So you know, but your son will be the one to build it, and I'll allow you to take part in it. You know, you can get some of the building materials together and that kind of thing, but you're not going to be the one that builds the temple. And so he and so I just thought that was great, where, you know, sometimes God gives us promises. He gives us passions and desires in our heart, and some of those are for us, and some are for our kids, and some are for our grandkids. And that some of those passions and desires are for now, and some are for later. Sometimes they're just a different time period than what they are. But the cool thing about David, the example that he set, is that as much as, and I don't want to put too much emotion into what David felt, but I would think it would be pretty cool to build a temple for God, you know, and to be told no, that would be pretty disappointing. And so, you know, but he didn't go off and say, I'm going to do this anyway. It's going to be great, and it's going to be good, and, you know, I'm just going to do it anyway, and God will be happy when we're done, because He's going to be so mesmerized by what I did. You know, he said, okay, I'll obey you. You know best, and I will follow your plan. And so what we're going to do now is well, you can do it at your table if you want to, but there's in front of you there is a journal page. At the top it says "You Said What," and so that was kind of the name of my talk this morning. But I was just going to spend like 10, 15 minutes or so, and just have you guys just kind of, I know sometimes, like, when we're at home or we're in this season or any season where life just kind of has a hiccup and there's something else that comes into your life that's taking up your time, and so then you're not able to go on with normal activities, that we kind of forget about some of those passions and those those promises that we feel like God has spoken to us. And so it's going to give you guys some time to just kind of write down some of those things, just talk to God about those, and to ask Him what your part is in it. You know, sometimes it's going to be that He wants us to take an active part in those desires and passions that we have. And sometimes He's saying, you know what, there's a foundation that needs to be laid that isn't going to be quite as glamorous and quite as, maybe not quite as exciting, but He can make it exciting when we obey Him and we get aligned with His will, that is our part in it, and we can see the end goal. And so we're just going to take about, like 10 or 15 minutes here and just kind of write down some things, and then we'll share. If somebody wants to share, they can. You know, we won't record that part, so I won't put that on the internet. Bare your soul, and I will put it on the web. No, I'm kidding, not really. So you guys can do that. You can go off somewhere or stay at your table. Either way is fine.